Hey guys, I'm John Barklow, and today Josh Smith and I are going to do what's called the rewarming drill. And so you've never done this before, right?
No.
So I unfortunately have had the honor of doing it probably for the last 20 years. This is a drill that we used to teach in Alaska when we were teaching winter warfare. And the intent of the drill is really to build confidence in the person and their kit, right? We were trying to simulate with the rewarming drill a worst case scenario where you get wet. And the ways you can get wet in the backcountry of the mountains are almost endless, right? When you start to think about it. Crossing a log, you can easily slip off and fall in a creek. Walking along the edge of a river that's got snow along the side and the bank gives way. Pack rafting, flipping your canoe, falling off the back of the raft on a remote float hunt in Alaska. It doesn't even have to be winter at that point. The water is so cold. You just came back from a hunt up in British Columbia.
Yeah, that was a horse hunt, and we actually crossed several rivers on horses. So if you have a horse issue in the middle of a river, my son Hank actually nearly lost his balance going across a beaver dam we were crossing, and we actually shot his moose that night, but it was a good chance that he ended up real wet in that situation.
Yeah, so there's a myriad of ways that you can get wet, and if and when you get wet, having a protocol to work through so that you've practiced with your partners to know what you're gonna do, kind of know what your priorities are. But like I said, to instill the confidence that this doesn't have to be a life and death situation. Mm-hmm. It might not be comfortable, but we can manage it. And what we're gonna simulate is we're on a backpack hunt, we're in the middle of nowhere, we're not gonna call for an easy evacuation. There's no helicopter or plane gonna come get us. You and I are alone, we're on our own. We can't hike to the truck or back to a cabin. And so when you work through this scenario, you're gonna find if there's any kind of weaknesses in your clothing, you're gonna find out if there's any weaknesses in your equipment. Quite frankly, you're gonna find out if there's any weaknesses in your partnership, right?
Right.
Can you work together under stress and figure this out? But the confidence that you're gonna get when you come out of this, I think you'll find is you're just gonna be that next level of outdoorsman, because so many times people will get wet, they will get cold, and exposure sets in, or they think they're going into hypothermia. That's really a lot of times the biggest reason people feel panicked and want to push the SOS button. At a minimum, you and I want to leave the mountains on our terms, right?
Right.
We spent all this time, all this money going on these hunts. We don't want to get pushed out because, I fell in up to my waist and got wet. It's like, nope, we're going to get in our tent, we're going to dry out, we're going to ride this out, and we're going to be capable to hunt again the next day, or at least extract ourselves from the field. So that's kind of what we're going to try to simulate here.
And people might wonder, well, why are we going to voluntarily just go get in cold water? And it's a good idea for people to do this in a situation where you can kind of control the variables. If it goes wrong for you at home, you can go in your house, or you can go get in your truck and warm up, analyze what you did wrong, where was your system a mess, and then try it again. But that's why you train, any kind of training. That's why you practice shooting at high angles and in wind, and it's to have that confidence. And the other thing is a lot of times you might fall in on your way in. Maybe you're hiking into camp. The other idea of this is to be able to extend your hunt and stay in the field.
Absolutely.
If you have to go hike all the way back to the trailhead and head back to town, and you just planned this hunt for an entire year and you just blew it in the first day because you fell in and got wet. And this might even give you the confidence, not that you want to take really big risks, but if you do have to cross that beaver dam, it's like, well, if I do fall in, I know I can get dry, versus well, we better not do that. We better just leave the area.
Yeah, and we spend a lot of money on our clothing and equipment, right? So we want to get the most performance out of it. And so we need to test it to find out what that performance is. Hey, you may do this test to realize, you know what? That particular piece or that particular level of gear, maybe it's not exactly what I want, and maybe I'm going to swap that out for something else before I go on that one hunt.
Sure.
In the military, we're teaching guys to go on missions where you don't get to go home because you're cold, wet, hungry, etc., right? And so if you don't have to be at that level, but if you extrapolate that out to the hunt you talked about where, hey, it took me 20 years to draw this tag, or I've got all this money or 2 weeks of vacation invested. I don't want to end it because I fell in, crossing the log to go into camp.
Right.
And so that's what this is going to simulate. Now, understand it's a drill, right? So there's lots of ways we can do this. We can get in, with all our clothes, which we're going to do, and our packs. Don't really need to do that. We want to try to, boil it down to its essence, and what we're really trying to achieve here is understand that we're capable of doing this, and our gear is capable of keeping us alive and working through our survival protocol.
Yeah, the pack deal, we could jump in with our packs. If you fall off a beaver dam or you fall in, you're gonna be bailing out probably quicker than we're gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
And also, like, my sleeping bag's in a dry bag.
Correct.
Most of the stuff, I pack my extra clothes and stuff in at least a water resistant bag, if not waterproof. So even if you soaked your pack, you're not gonna let your pack just sit there and soak clear through for, minutes upon minutes. You're gonna be getting out. So just for people that might be wondering why we're not wearing our packs into there.
Yep. And let me say, so this is dangerous, right? So kids, don't try this at home. I want people to do this, but I want them to do it in a very safe way. So when we used to do it in the military, people can find that online. We had doctors there, we had ambulance standing by. We've got people here, we've got vehicles right here.
I'm expendable.
I would say if people want to do this, they can do this in their backyard. They can do it with their hunting partner. They can take their clothes, they can put it in a bucket of water. They can do it right then and there. And if something goes wrong, they can go inside, right? You can do it at a trailhead. What you don't want to do is you don't want to realize that your system doesn't work and that all this money that you invested in this gear doesn't perform the way you wanted when you're swimming to shore in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, on a moose hunt.
Right.
And now you're in a life and death situation. You can prevent that by working through realistic training exercises like this.
Sure. Well,
I think we should do it. Yep.
All right. There was ice. This was fully ice 3 or 4 days ago. Oh, sure.
All right, so waist deep, neck deep.
You can feel it on the dingleberries.
All right. Head under.
Head under.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
It's a little chilly.
Woo! So, take the opportunity, try to wring any water off right now, but we don't want to take any time doing anything but puffing up.
Okay.
We want to stop any more heat loss by puffing up. So
this is where I keep my puppies, in a dry bag.
Shelter is your #1 survival priority, and clothing is that first line of defense.
So this is where I would have taken my wet stuff off had I not had you standing here.
So let's talk.
Doesn't seem to make sense to put on a dry puffy over wet stuff.
If you take the time to do that, all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. Because although you will be dry quicker, you'll have a frozen pile of clothes that you're gonna have to figure out how to thaw out and warm up before you can extract yourself from the backcountry.
Okay.
So what we want to do now is we just want to seek shelter, then we'll figure out the rest.
Okay.
Because if it's blowing snow right now, we've got merely a couple minutes to set this tent up and get inside.
Yeah.
Before things start to go bad.
Do you throw a hat and beanie on, or a beanie and gloves on after you do all this?
I'd put a beanie on or your hood right now. Matter of fact, I'm gonna put my hood up because I'm starting to get cold out the top of my head.
already.
Yep.
All right.
Silver. So are you starting to shiver at all?
Not shivering, just chilly.
Yeah, it's a pretty good response when you start to shiver because it's your body trying to generate heat.
Okay.
So we're gonna start feeding it with food and warm drinks when we get in the tent.
Okay, good.
Make sure that you've got your pack, Josh.
Okay.
Go to that door. Make sure that you've got your pack near the door so you don't have to get out of the tent once we get in. And put your ground pad in there and a sleeping bag. And then bail in the tent.
Feel the boots?
Yeah.
Can feel there's water sloshing in them. This is just the Navy guy's way of getting me in his tent.
It works every time. We're in a shelter and we're puffed up. So let's talk about why we did what we did. So we get wet, our shit's wet no matter what, right?
Yeah.
If we immediately strip our gear and put our puffy on, one, we're wasting time. And two, we're just gonna extend the problem because now we're gonna have a pile of wet gear and now we're gonna be warm and dry, but we're not gonna be able to do anything. So because our stuff's wet, a modern clothing system and gear is gonna be able to manage this moisture. So let's, number one survival priority, seek shelter. Now we're in here, what was this, 10 minutes maybe?
Yeah.
Now we're safe. We can zip the tent up. We're gonna start reversing this heat loss. And now it's just a process of using our body heat, our internal engine that we're gonna feed with water and food to start cooking ourselves dry. Close this tent up and this thing's gonna become a sauna in here just with our body heat. And that's how we're gonna do this. And then in enough time, we're gonna be capable of, okay, now I might take my pants off and wring out any extra. Take my top off, take my socks, change socks out, all that stuff. And now we've stabilized the situation. It's not a dire emergency now. It's just more inconvenient than anything. And we're gonna work through this process.
Right.
So let's get some stove going, get a hot cup of coffee maybe, and then we can get some hot fluids and then we'll move on to food.
Okay. Well, there you go.
I got water going.
That's why you bring extra water. There you go. I already had coffee in it, so yours is gonna be extra strong.
No, you did.
I spilled my coffee on, but I'll just drain it right off of my pack. That's how you know your pack's somewhat waterproof.
Drain your coffee off and drink it.
It tastes like a combination of bear and elk and moose blood and sweat.
So, start getting warm fluids, right? Stabilize the situation, and then we can start thinking about eating something. Again, our body heat is going to push the moisture through all these layers. That's why these technical fabrics are so great. But to kind of help that along, when you get to the point you're like, okay, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling warm, you're starting to warm up, dry out. If you think, say, your pants have extra water in it, you can certainly strip your pants off now, wring them out, and you're gonna find there's not a lot of water in them to begin with, just because of what they're made out of. Then put them back on, because the best source of heat we have right now is our body, okay? So now let's say we ride this out. If it's a blizzard outside, whatever the case may be, we're like, hey, we feel good, yeah. Not hypothermic, no. Hey, do you think we can get out and build a fire now? Okay, we can do that. But all this has to come after the fact of, you know, our immediate survival priorities. Because if you default to the fire first, or default to taking the clothing off first, it's not gonna work out most of the time in a real life scenario, right? So we wanna simulate worst case, and we wanna train to that so that we're conditioned to react that way.
Is there any good way to, as far as drying out your boots or keeping your boots from being frozen?
Great question, yeah.
Because like right now my boots are outside the tent, assuming it's super cold out, rifle season.
Yep.
I would imagine at least have them in the tent, but would you put them in the bottom of your bag to keep them from freezing solid?
So I definitely bring them in the tent. You could put them underneath your bag, on top of your ground pad, underneath your bag, say, you know, where your knees are.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, these boots are not going to dry in this environment. They're just not, right? And so when I'm going out, not in warmer weather, but when I'm going out in colder weather, I bring something called, aside from an extra pair of socks, I bring something called vapor barrier socks, or VBL socks, which are basically like little waterproof socks, almost like did your mom ever put your foot in like a bread bag and then stick it in like a boot before you went sled riding or something?
Yeah, that was called Gore-Tex back in the early 80s.
Yeah, well that's a VBL sock. So the best thing to do is, because these boots won't dry, they will be cold, we'll change our socks out here, put dry socks on, then you put the VBL sock over the dry sock, and then you slide it into the boot, and that waterproof barrier is going to protect you from that cold, wet boot, because it's never going to dry out here. It's just not.
Right.
And so kind of thinking through that, and like, what are we going to do? Like if we were going on that float hunt, we would definitely want to do it, or even a moose hunt, because you're around bogs and swamps and things like that. It would be a good thing to carry vapor barrier socks. So like that would be a lesson learned we could write, like, hey, you know, make sure to bring VBL socks when we do these types of hunts.
Sure.
And then go and try that.
I think the biggest key and takeaway would be like putting your boots underneath your body, like you said, under your knees, just so long.
It's going to stop it from freezing.
If you want to get out and build a fire, you can actually get them laced up.
Yes.
And you're not putting an iceberg on.
Exactly.
My biggest struggle staying warm in general in the field is my toes, feet. So
something I traditionally bring on colder weather hunts is like little puffy socks. You can find like little small camp booties. So we're gonna wanna take our wet socks off here soon, especially if your feet get cold. Wring them out, put the socks just in your sleeping bag or in the pockets, inside pockets, your puffy jacket. Your body heat will dry those over time. Put a dry pair of socks on, and then if you need more insulation, you have little puffy socks.
Sure.
So again, that's something, you know, that I just know that I need that at a certain point, and so that's on my gear list. Maybe you put that on your gear list, right? So you see how that,
so I was gonna ask,
see how it's starting to come to the bottom? So that's where you wanna like wring that out, like wring out any of that moisture that's starting to accumulate. It's gonna be at the ends of your sleeves, the ends of your pant legs, and around the hem of your jackets.
Yeah, and I noticed, yeah, look at that. That's pretty impressive. So, am I imagining that I've got water coming through my bag, or is that from me dripping?
No, so what this is literally the visual clue that water is moving through this fabric, right? So it's not, I didn't get it wet from the outside in, it's coming from the inside out.
Yeah.
And so this is why we're gonna start to move this moisture through. This is the visual process of that happening.
It's easier to see, you know, compared to the camo stuff. It's easier to see on yours.
Yep, it's easier to see on your bag than it's say this bag, but I can see it where it's starting to come through. So even if we get to the point where we're like, hey, we're feeling good, we can't go anywhere, we're gonna have to stay here 12 hours, might as well stay this cycle of darkness. Tomorrow morning we'll be ready. We can get out and build that fire. We can also get out and start with our puffy on, start doing laps around the tent, right? And increasing our body heat and then coming back in. Increasing our body heat, coming back in. Eat something, crank that metabolism. All this is what's going to, and it's the most reliable source of heat we have, because we can't guarantee we can go out depending on the conditions and start the fire. We can guarantee that we can seek shelter with this clothing, and then hopefully we have some food to feed ourselves, that it's going to warm us up and start to push things out through the system.
You want me to boil some water for food then?
Yeah. I got some water going here. Well, I had some. It's probably pretty hot. I probably am not that far away from having it ready. Another way of drying your clothing out, I call this the static rewarming drill, is what we call the dynamic rewarming drill. So we could do another exercise where we fell in. Now let's say we're an hour from the truck, a mile from the cabin. We could get out, again, do the same thing. Squeegee off the water, put on our puff, but as opposed to setting up our camp, maybe we don't have our camp, we're just gonna start to hike and generate that body heat, cut the distance to safety, and continue to improve our position and heat up as we go and cook ourselves dry as we get back to camp.
So you're really talking, you don't have your camp on your back, you don't have your bag, you don't have your tent.
And you're close to some type of, you know, the trailhead, the truck, the cabin, your main camp, whatever the case may be.
You're trying to drive up your heart rate and get your engine really pumping.
Yep. Again, same thing we're doing, push it out, but if it's really bad weather, we got nowhere to go, camp is on our back,
right?
We have to stay in place. But if we don't, we can puff up, we want to insulate ourselves, seek that shelter from clothing, but now cut the distance and try to get to the cabin, try to get to the truck.
And same thing, are you leaving all your that wet coat on and those wet clothes?
I am to start.
Yeah.
So if we're an hour into it and we got another hour, but we're feeling good, and you actually want to stop and strip your pants off, your base layer, absolutely. But the immediate course of action when this happens is to immediately stop any more heat loss and seek that shelter from clothing. And if we establish that as partners, if people understand that, it's going to help immensely, because you could waste 10-15 minutes stripping clothes off and trying to wring it out, and in the meantime your body core temp just continues to plummet. You may get to a point where you can't come back from that.
Right.
So you're better off to just stop it where you can. That's what this great stuff is all about. If we were wearing, cotton, flannel, the big wool jackets, maybe a canvas jacket like maybe our grandfathers did, man, the opportunity to have hypothermia was greater.
Yeah.
Margin of safety was smaller. They couldn't do this. You can't do this with just any clothing you want. It's got to be one of these new technical systems that's going to allow you to do that.
Sure.
So understanding what you have and the capabilities is really important.
In the situation we're in, if you've got plenty of water and whatnot, would you even boil some water, throw it in an Nalgene and throw it in your bag with you?
Yeah, so I meant to talk to you about that. So we talked about boots, and this all ties together. So we've got fuel, we've got water. We can absolutely boil a Nalgene bottle and put it inside the sleeping bag. Matter of fact, we should do that. And what that does is that's an external heat source we're adding inside that's going to help push this moisture through. It's also going to help warm us up. The other thing is, now we're going to put our boots on. those boots are either frozen or certainly cold at a minimum, we can reboil that Nalgene, take that hot Nalgene bottle, put it in one of our boots, warm it up 5-10 minutes, put it on our foot, transfer that bottle to the other boot, warm it up 5-10 minutes, put it on. It's going to help.
Just saves you some of that heat in your foot.
Exactly, because feet really don't. So I just, change my socks out. Feet don't really have a lot of, mine don't. Mine are numb all the time, it seems like. So.
Yeah. Throw that in my bag. Take my other sock off. Yeah, so look at the, you can actually see the water coming through my puffies here. And you can actually see my foot steaming out here. It's cold enough outside. All right, and then I'm always carrying an extra pair of socks at least.
Always.
Because I also have a problem. My feet get cold, but they also sweat.
Do they sweat?
So,
which probably makes them even colder.
Yeah. So to be able to throw dry socks on and get in your bag at night is really nice.
I've been on hunts and training exercises where the weather was so bad. One particular, the last hunt I did in Alaska when I was a resident was a solo dull sheep hunt. And the weather just continued to get more miserable by the day. Although the first day was great, right? Suckered me in. And every day I'd get out, I'd go hunt. And when I came back, I'd be not wet like we are, but certainly damp.
Yeah.
Just from wearing rain gear, just from the high humidity.
Yeah.
And the ability to get in my tent and do exactly what we're doing, to dry out, to warm up, to just kind of like push the reset button, was everything, right?
Hank and I were doing this really daily in Canada on his moose hunt. It rained damn near nonstop. And yeah, we were getting into our tent, but we didn't actually have these puffy pants, and that was like the missing piece. I had the puffy and all that, but it's actually amazing. Look at the steam that comes out of that bag. Like when I had my socks off, this thing was just steaming. It's amazing the heat that you're generating in your own bag.
Yep. The opportunity for these types of things to happen they're rare, but they can kill you if you're not ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had a little bit of that hot water. I've thrown that Nalgene down at my feet, and then this peak meal right now in my hands feels
real
good.
Yeah.
And what's amazing too, like we have this tent open for filming purposes, but
it would be a sauna.
It'd be a sauna right now.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
Because we have airflow. There's a breeze going right through this tent.
Yeah. But with our body heat, bringing these hot water bottles in, the food bags, it would be very warm. A lot of times it can be 10, sometimes 15 degrees warmer inside a tent, a good tent, than the outside atmosphere.
The other advantage about practicing this at home is you can really dial in how much gear. I know people tend to, two things, either underpack or overpack. I generally say I'm an overpacker because I'm trying to think every scenario. But if you practice this at home, you realize I can go into the field with confidence that I don't actually need that extra coat, that extra heavy pair of pants, right? Like, okay, if I get wet, I know I can dry them. So I'm going to leave that extra pair of pants or coat home. But if you don't know, then you tend to bring too much, or the vice versa. You go do this and you realize you don't actually have enough in your pack. Like you don't have a puffy or an extra pair of socks or a stove.
Yeah, I just think the capability it provides, that margin of safety it gives you. Again, it's what are you doing? How important is it? Sometimes you go out and your attitude is, I'm gonna go light. I'm gonna maybe, push up against the margin of safety. But if the weather's bad, if something happens to me, I'm just gonna turn around and go back home. No harm, no foul, right?
Right.
Or other trips like the moose hunt you're talking about, or some of the things I've just discussed, it's like there is no going home. Like
Right.
you're stuck. And so at that point, you know, you need to make sure that you are bringing everything. And I say there's kind of a bell curve in an outdoorsman's kind of progression, and we start out and we have no experience, and so we often pack too much because, you know, gear is the crutch. And then we get to the point where we've got enough experience to be dangerous, and so we don't bring anything and cut our toothbrush in half. And and if you live through that, then you kind of end up somewhere in the middle where it's like, you know, I bring an inflatable pillow because if not, my neck's stiff and I can't, you know, sleep.
Well, there's that other
then,
part of it. You know, I've heard Snyder talk about this, but also if you're comfortable, you actually might stay in the field 2 extra days.
Well, and that's
your
what
back hurts.
To me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, you're
for what we're talking about,
right?
You know,
it's the other thing is back to people thinking like, well, I'm just going on a kind of a quick hunt. If it gets too uncomfortable, I'll head back. It can be 70, 80 degrees in archery season, and 4 days later, 2 days later, there's 20 inches of snow on the ground, and it's heavy, wet snow. It's crushed your tent. And you can find yourself, especially out-of-staters that come here and they aren't really watching the weather close. They don't understand how fast it can change. And your little easy archery hunt in September can turn into a survival situation in a hurry.
It absolutely can, and especially when you start factoring in altitude, which, you know, people that don't live in the mountains don't necessarily understand that, you know, it can be raining in the valley and snowing like hell at elevation.
Right.
That can really take people by surprise.
A tarp is another really good, you know, when we were up in moose hunting, we spent a ton of time glassing under a tarp. We'd cut down some little trees and guy out a tarp and sit under that thing and keep ourselves dry, be able to cook meals under their glass. There's little pieces of gear like that you can bring to keep yourself from having to maybe do this kind of a drill if you're cold and wet.
Yep.
Or even just a tarp if you don't have a full-on tent where you can do this same drill under a tarp. Go get dry and throw out your sleeping bag and your pad, because a lot of guys will camp under a tarp during archery season.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, but to keep the rain off of you, it's just amazing how fast the weather can change. I know when Hank and I went to Canada, you can't Google the weather forecast in the middle of nowhere. And we were Googling the weather forecast for Watson Lake. And as it turns out, it was about 15 to 20 degrees off every single day. And Hank and I wore literally everything we took on that trip. And like I say, we were probably one piece of gear, like a puffy pair of pants away from being comfortable. But people need to keep that in mind. You know, even 70-degree days can mean 20-degree nights.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and you kill an animal or you get hurt or you do something, to be able to throw on a puffy coat. It's like, oh, I don't need a puffy coat. It's 70 degrees out. Well, but it's 20 degrees at 1 a.m.
We're not always out here to have miserable times, right?
Right.
We are looking to enjoy ourselves.
Right.
Could be type 2 fun.
Exactly.
Or type 3.
I'm legit warm at this point.
Oh, that's the thing. Like I said, you go from being the coldest person around to being the warmest person around. I mean, really, you do.
So how does, like for a base layer, what are the base layers we're wearing right now made out of?
So we're wearing polyester. The other alternative really is wool, merino wool. I think they're both great. Polyester, it's gonna dry a little quicker. It's gonna absorb a little less water. So in kind of wet, damp environments, I tend to default to polyester. But if you and I are in hunting out here for 2 weeks and staying in the tent together, like we're both gonna stink to where we hate each other.
Right.
So wool's gonna be great at like managing body odor better than poly. Gonna take a little longer to dry. There is a chemical process. I won't be able to tell you what it is off the top of my head, but you know, wool, even though it kind of steams itself dry, I don't particularly like that feeling. It takes a little longer. It can still keep you warm. But either one's gonna work, but that base layer, the important part is that it's thin. So a lot of people go, well, it's cold, I'm just gonna go right to a heavyweight base layer next to my skin. I don't particularly like that because that's gonna take longer to dry. And really what I'm looking for right now, and the reason that we're able to like stop shivering and start to warm up, is that base layer next to our skin is actually gonna dry out sooner than anything, right? And so, you know, if you start to say, hey man, I'm warm,
I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, we could do it now with the doors open, but you can go, hey, I'm gonna start opening this stuff up and start dumping even some body heat, but more moisture. You're gonna dry out even quicker,
God, it's
right?
like an oven coming out of there.
Exactly, yep, because your body heat's just trapping everything in there. Once you stabilize the situation and you understand how things work, then it just becomes a matter of time of like riding it out. Like you and I hung out in here, like I said, maybe we get out and build a fire, maybe we put our boots on, start doing, you know, laps around the tent, even in the middle of the night, coming back in, laying down, going to sleep. We're gonna be maybe not bone dry, right? There's gonna be parts like where I'm sitting, right? Like my butt and those kind of things that aren't gonna be totally dry, but we're gonna be capable of either extracting ourselves from the field, or that's when we're like, hey, I'm gonna take those pants off and lay them on top of the tent or on a branch of a tree and like totally dry them out while I still have my puffy pants on.
Right.
And then I'm gonna put them on, right? Because now we're not in a survival situation. Now it's just a management of the situation.
Yep.
And that's a totally different thing. If we panic and we do some of the things we talked about, that's where people get into trouble.
I can see that the thick base layer, that rings true to me as well, because in a normal situation, like hiking hard, like I'm a sweater. So the more that you soak that base layer, the thicker it is, the more water you're gonna have next to your skin, the longer it's gonna take to dry that, versus a thin layer that you sweat it up and then you stop in glass. You got a lot less moisture sitting right there against your skin to get dry.
Yeah, what we are doing here is just a kind of a more drawn out version of, we hike to the top of that ridge, we get sweated up because we're chasing the sunrise to get to the top to glass mule deer. We get up there, we're damp, it's a little breezy, it's kind of cool because the sun hasn't come up. We just put the puffy jacket right over top of everything. It's gonna dry out that lightweight base layer next to our skin, 5-10 minutes. All of a sudden, we're not gonna be chilled, we're gonna be warm.
That's the
we
big
start
mistake.
to
I
hike
think
again,
people
we're
get
dry
there
again.
and they take off that coat and they hang it in a tree, but then it just sits there and stays wet.
Correct. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not doing you any good, and you still have the problem of having a wet coat.
Wet
right?
coat and still one less layer of insulation on your body.
Correct. Yep. So that's why I just say it's important for everybody to kind of work through a process and figure out something based on some principles, and then
Now,
go out and try it.
talk about, you said this is treated down, like just a straight down bag, like your old school down bag. You know, I know generally getting a down bag wet can be a big problem on an extended hunt. Talk about the difference, I guess, between like a down bag and like the treated down.
Yeah, so a treated down is basically taking the goose or duck feathers and applying like a durable water repellent finish. Same thing you'd put on like a Gore-Tex jacket, or even these puffy jackets have it. And so what that does is when moisture is introduced inside here, the down feathers that are really lofty and trap your body heat, they don't just clump and compress,
Yep.
give up that loft, and once the loft is given up, there's nothing to trap that body heat. So this bag isn't going to be as warm, or that jacket isn't going to be as warm. The DWR stops it from being compromised as much from the moisture. The treatment in here is I think it's the best DWR on the market right now for treated down. But if this bag was not treated, you basically wouldn't even be in a sleeping bag right now. That thing would be like just shriveled up like a dish rag. It would look like on your body. They would be completely compressed. And I think when if you were to like roll over, when you get out, look at where you're sitting, that compression, it's going to be a little compressed there as well.
Sure.
The bag I chose to wear, just to compare and contrast, this is a synthetic bag. This is almost like completely impervious to any moisture ruining the insulation, but it's not going to be as lightweight or as packable as, say, that down bag.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think for hunters and backpackers, personally, just as a general statement, I don't think that there's any place in our backpacks for just traditional down. I think traditional down is great for, high altitude mountaineering and things where it's like super dry and warm, or like we're out walking the dog or snowshoeing with, around a cabin. But for what we do and what we could get trapped in, especially in Montana here, I think treated down or synthetic is like the best choice.
Yeah. In that mountaineering environment, you're never ever going to be around running water or wet. It's going to be
very rarely. You're looking at extreme cold temperatures.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're at elevation, so it's very arid. There's not a lot of moisture even in the air, so it's not compromised. I mean, yeah, you spill soup in your lap or something, but
I would never do that.
But I think for the most part though now, treated downs, there's really no reason not to use them. It's just going to give you that extra level of performance.
Yeah, see those boots, I just, for the sake of the drill, I don't want to stick them in here and just get all muddy, but those things are cold as hell.
Yep.
Like if I was actually going to have to be out here for the next 3 days, I would have those under my bag right now.
Well,
trying to keep the inside of those.
And those vapor barrier socks, like I said, they're clutch. They came from the mountaineering community. You could wear Gore-Tex socks, sealskin socks, VBL socks. They kind of all do the same thing. But you could boil this and then take this steaming hot bottle, put it in there, and then put it on your foot. That's going to help as well.
Yeah, exactly.
This process, not just the rewarming drill, but I would just group this all into realistic training. So the rewarming drill, going out and practicing your fire making skills in inclement weather, pitching your tent in the dark, in the wind, whatever it is. I think that we as outdoorsmen have a responsibility to, the people we leave at home to like be as capable as possible. That aside, we also want to go and I want to be self-reliant. I want to be the guy that can go out there, be self-reliant like the old mountain men, right? And try to be successful. And those times I get to go out, are precious to me because we don't get enough time. We probably would never get enough time. And so to maximize that, I don't want little things like a storm or getting wet to push me out of the mountains. I like to say I want to leave the mountains on my terms, not Mother Nature's. And so drills like this, done safely, can really help build that confidence, but really help, as we've discussed, like really dial in your system. And not just your clothing, not just your sleeping bag, but like your ground pad, your stove, your food, whatever the case may be, your shelter. And to me, it's fun because you don't need a tag in your pocket to do any of this. You can do this any time of the year and practice with your partners. And to me, it's fun because it just makes you that much more capable when you do get that tag in your pocket to go out there and be more successful.
Yeah, I think, like you said, even the setting up of a tent, building a fire. You could go out on a day like today back in the woods right here and just try to find dry enough wood to get a fire started with what you take in your kit.
Absolutely.
Like in the bottom of my bag here, I've got a med kit, like understanding how you even use the parts of your med kit. All those different types of things just make you more capable when you're out in the field. And you're not going to necessarily need to do this drill when it's just fun and daylight and you're close to your house. You're going to be basically in an emergency situation where you're maybe even a little bit panicked or paranoid, but you won't be panicked or paranoid if you have the confidence you know what to do. It's like, okay, well, we're going to get out and here's what we're going to do. I think most people, if they fell in a ice cold creek, would start to panic because they would immediately know that they're not actually sure what to do. And that's where I think a lot of the panic comes in, is because you're just not sure what steps to take.
Exactly. And so the more you can kind of think through these things, train realistically, the more confidence you're going to have, the better decisions you're going to make. Because oftentimes we'll make a bad decision, but we need to break that cycle of bad decisions really quick, or it can lead to a cascading effect of bad decisions. And so having, the confidence that we've been here before, this is going to suck. Nobody said it's going to be fun, but we're not going to die. Just kind of puts a lot of things in perspective, and then you just start to go through very methodically your actions.
Yep.
Hopefully I never have to do this for real.
Yeah.
But if and when it happens, that I'm ready, right, to kind of confront that and work through it.
Yeah, I think really to close it out too, I think the best thing that you could do as a viewer watching this is to share it with your buddies and actually get your buddies together and do it together. Make this a fun thing.
Absolutely.
Have them bring all their stuff over on a Saturday and have 4 or 5 of your hunting friends bring all your stuff, tell them what you're going to do, and have them come and maybe don't even tell them what you're going to do. Just say, hey, pack as if you're ready to go on a 10-day hunt, and here's the weather conditions, and come to my house on Saturday and we're going to try something. And see if that way they can't prepare for it, and just see if their kit is ready. And it'd be real interesting to see, I'd love it if people would even, share those videos with us or tag us in those. And it would be fun to see, some of the different pieces that somebody might be missing from their kit. And I think you would be potentially doing one of your best friends or your buddies the biggest favor you could do them, to expose that maybe they're not quite ready as they thought they were.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts there, but I'll just say that, so one of the things we used to teach is every time you pack your ruck, you're packing it as if you're going to stay another day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if I'm packing to hike back to the truck and the truck's a mile away, I'm packing the same way I packed that time is the time I packed to go into the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know what's going to happen. And when we used to kind of spring this drill on people, you'd see the look of panic on their face because they didn't have water in their pack. They packed things just haphazardly. Nothing was in the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
They were out of stove gas, whatever the case may be, right? And it didn't matter to us. You were going to run through this drill and work through it and learn your lessons no matter what. I still take that lesson every time I pack my ruck, and I'm like, nope, I've got to do it the right way. I've got to do it the right way. And just that discipline of doing that is just, something good to kind of do for that, 1 in a million time that
Well,
that
especially
it
if you're
happens.
hunting with loved ones. I mean, one of the best things I ever watched was a video about how to use a tourniquet in your med kit. And with making knives, we're providing a tool that someone could potentially really injure themselves with or die from. And you just learn the knowledge of how to use a $30 tourniquet, you could save a loved one.
Absolutely.
And just learning how to use this system, it could be, it was my son Hank in Canada that damn near fell off that beaver dam. I have video of him crossing that thing, and it was, it was sketchy. And so again, I could have been in a situation right then and there where it's like my son just fell in an ice cold creek, and now we got to get him
and
dry.
you're in the middle of nowhere there.
Yeah, nobody's coming in time to save you there,
No.
for sure.
No.
Yeah, we were a 10-mile horse ride to a lake, of which then you need a plane to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
knowledge is power, and ultimately keeps you in the field longer, which is what we're all there to do.
Well, what do you think? Pack up?
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
This is great.